This story started quite calmly at a museum downtown where our MC, Yuan, worked as a guide. Even though he's a broke sophomore attending the cheapest school around, he spends his time showing museum visitors the latest attraction, a recently acquired ancient golden coffin from Egypt. While going through his usual dull routine of explaining the details of the coffin, he spots a girl, cuter than LeBron James' left toe, taking shots and streaming on IG Live. Since the museum had strict rules against taking pictures or videos, Yuan put on his rise cap and decided to approach the girl, not just to stop her from breaking the rules, but maybe score as well. As he got closer, he tried to grab her phone to stop the live stream and casually asked for her number, hoping they could hang out later. But the girl flipped the script, telling him she wasn't taking shots of the museum's artifacts. She had been taking photos of him this entire time, giving off serious Neander vibes. She even showed him the pics and videos she had taken of him, leaving Yuan flustered since he'd never been in such an awkward situation before. Determined not to come off as a simp, Yuan coolly walked away, telling the chick that all he wanted was to stop the photo taking, nothing more. But the girl, true to her Neander nature, ran after his infinite rees, insisting on tagging along as he gave her a tour of the museum. Realizing there was no escaping this thirsty girl, Yuan reluctantly explained the details of the Egyptian golden coffin to her. Just then, the museum security announced a fire drill, ordering everyone to evacuate. Yuan was more confused than Sudoku, wondering what could have caused the fire suddenly. But the Neander princess was thrilled. An early evacuation meant Yuan would be off work soon, and they would clearly get some massive clapping done that day. Yuan, however, stayed focused, grabbed her hand, and headed for the exit. But before they could make it out, a sudden earthquake shook the building, causing the floor to crack and the ceiling to collapse, stopping them dead in their tracks. Earlier that day, there had been news about a mysterious rift opening up, through which monsters from another dimension had started invading the city. Everyone had been warned to stay alert. Unfortunately, that very rift appeared just outside the museum. Back in the present, the Night Eagle Squad, a special unit tasked with handling such incidents, arrived at the scene. Meanwhile, Yuan found himself trapped inside the museum with the girl, abandoned by the rest of the museum staff. Outside, the Night Eagle Squad rushed in, with their captain appointing Lan, Yuan's badass, white-haired sister, to lead the mission. Lan charged toward the museum, eager to finish the task quickly so she could grab dinner with her brother. Inside, Yuan's expression mirrored those of Timon and Pumbaa while watching Simba clap Nala when he heard his sister's name outside. Shaking it off, he attempted to carry the chick to safety, but quickly realized she was bleeding from her ears and mouth while still clutching her phone. The gruesome sight left him in shock, sweating bullets, as his only opportunity to enter a girl's glorious paradise had been snatched from him. Meanwhile, outside the museum, the rift in the sky continued to grow, halting the Night Eagle Squad's advance. A larger rift meant more dangerous monsters were on the verge of emerging. That moment, Lan gripped her large sword, ready for whatever was coming. Inside the museum, Yuan, now panicking, managed to drag the girl under the Egyptian coffin and pulled out his phone to make a distress call, only to find the battery completely dead. Desperate, he tried using the dead girl's phone, but was horrified to see an image of a monster with two menacing red eyes staring back at him from the rift. Outside the museum, the Night Eagle Squad hovered toward the rift, preparing to battle the monster trying to break through into the city. At that moment, one of the squad members, a girl with orange hair, warned Lan that something was seriously off about this rift. She suspected it wasn't just an ordinary medium-level one. It was far more dangerous. Suddenly, a massive clawed hand, surrounded by a dark, ominous aura, appeared inside the rift, startling the team. They immediately attempted to contain the rift using a three-dimensional gate, but Lan's disbelief grew when she realized the rift couldn't be absorbed. That's when she knew her colleague was right. This was no ordinary rift. It was a calamity-ranked one. With that in mind, Lan launched a blazing attack, summoning all her power to strike down the monstrous hand. As she glowed with intense mystic energy during the attack, the orange-haired girl stood in awe, wondering if Lan was truly the prodigy who would become a military legend at just 17. Meanwhile, outside the rift, the captain and the rest of the team quickly realized they had underestimated the situation. They tried once more to pull the rift into the three-dimensional gate, shouting for Lan and the others inside to evacuate immediately. However, Lan knew deep down that their efforts would be useless. The rift couldn't be dragged in. It was far too powerful. As she continued her fierce battle against the clawed hand, she made a startling discovery. What she was fighting wasn't even the real entity. It was just an illusion. Back inside the museum, Yuan was still frozen in shock, staring at the image of the monster on the chick's phone. In the blink of an eye, the giant, clawed hands from the rift emerged, lunging at him. He managed to dodge the attack by running for his life, trying to call out for Lan as he did. But just as he made his escape, the claws slashed him, sending him crashing to the ground, his phone slipping from his grasp. In that moment, his body was dragged into the rift, and he could suddenly hear the voices of his sister and her team, desperately trying to get Lan to stop attacking the illusion. But Lan kept fighting, undeterred. Hearing his sister's name, Yuan was stunned. It was impossible for him to believe that his gentle, well-mannered sister was the same badass warrior battling monsters inside the rift. Determined to see for himself, he squinted through the blinding light, trying to catch a glimpse of her. Finally, his efforts paid off. He witnessed his sister, encased in a glowing sphere, fighting the monstrous illusion with lethal precision. The sight was beyond anything he could have imagined, leaving him utterly speechless as he watched her battle with the full intent to destroy the creature. Meanwhile, Lan noticed that the monster's full body had begun to materialize, strengthening her resolve not to give up. The captain, who had been standing around uselessly watching everything unfold, ordered the rest of the team to protect Lan as they worked on pulling the rift into the 9-anchor dimension. As Lan continued her fierce battle with the monster, Yuan grew increasingly terrified for her safety, pleading with her to stop trying to throw her life away. But Lan was resolute. She was determined to end this menace and launched another relentless attack on the creature until the monster struck her, sending her flying and coughing up blood, her HP dropping significantly. Watching Lan get knocked around like her life didn't matter, Yuan broke down, crying like a helpless sissy, begging her to stop before she met her maker. In that heart-wrenching moment, everything clicked for Yuan. The reason Lan never came home on weekends or during summer break until it was dark wasn't because she didn't want to. She was out there, fighting monsters all this time. He regretted not realizing it sooner, wishing he could have been there to protect her. As Lan lay there, visibly drained, Yuan moved closer, desperate to talk sense into her and convince her to retreat. But as he approached, he suddenly realized Lan couldn't hear or see him. What Yuan didn't know was that Lan could sense his presence, even though she couldn't physically see him. In her mind, she had no choice but to keep fighting. The dimensional gate wasn't ready yet, and she felt it was her responsibility to protect not only her brother but the entire city. With newfound determination, Lan got back on her feet, ready to face the monster again, aiming to buy time for the team to activate the dimensional gate. With the speed of sound, she charged at the creature. Seeing her dive headfirst into battle, Yuan's blood pressure increased to 1,000, and he screamed for her to stop playing Wonder Woman. In the next moment, Yuan suddenly opened his eyes, shocked to find himself lying in a hospital bed. He had thought he was already dead and chilling with his maker. Just then, he overheard the doctor speaking with Lan, asking her if she wanted her brother to remain a vegetable for the rest of his life. Hearing this, Yuan was overjoyed. Lan was alive. Filled with relief, he leaped out of bed and rushed to find her. As he stepped out of the room, he saw Lan, her face lighting up as she noticed he was awake. Lan immediately wrapped her arms around Yuan, and though he reassured her that he was fine, he suddenly noticed something odd. She seemed shorter. Puzzled, he wondered what the heck was going on. But before he could say anything, Lan brushed it off, telling him not to pretend he was okay, just to comfort her. She reminded him that he'd been hit by Carcoon and didn't need to act like the big brother right now. Hearing this, Yuan's eyes widened in shock, since the only time he'd ever been hit by a car was 4 years ago. This confirmed his suspicions. He had somehow been reincarnated back in time, 4 years into the past. Even though the situation was serious, Yuan felt oddly chilled with everything going on. Now, he had a chance to protect Lan and prevent her from turning into the battle-hardened badass who spent her days fighting monsters instead of Netflixing like a typical Gen Z baddie. Just then, the Night Eagle squad captain barged into the room like an idiot and informed Yuan that the doctor had originally declared his brain fried and assumed he'd be a vegetable for life. He added that he was surprised to see Yuan awake, since he never thought he'd have the guts to pull through. Introducing himself as Lin, the captain extended his hand for a handshake, but Yuan, uninterested, brushed it off and grabbed Lan, leading her outside the room. Once outside, Yuan warned Lan to stay away from strangers, especially those with beards like criminals. Lan rolled her eyes and told him that Lin had been helping out ever since he had been hospitalized. Suddenly, a flashback of the events outside the museum hit Yuan. He remembered Lin as Lan's captain, urging her to keep fighting the monsters in the rift. Suspicious, Yuan told Lan that Lin was not to be trusted, suggesting he was only being super kind because he wanted something in return. Lan explained that Lin had complimented her talents and offered her a spot at the University of Talented Individuals. Yuan thought deeply about this. His first instinct was to prevent Lan from attending, hoping this would keep her from becoming the fierce monster-slaying warrior. But then his fried brain regenerated just one brain cell, which gave him the thought that if Lan didn't attend the university and get stronger, she'd be vulnerable when the monsters inevitably attacked in the future. With a new plan forming, Yuan told Lan to handle his discharge paperwork while he went back to confront Lin. Inside, Yuan didn't hold back. He accused Lin of only being nice because he wanted Lan to join his team and revealed that he knew about the rift, the monsters, and Lan's genius abilities. He even suggested Lin's kindness was just an act to lure his sister into joining his squad. Lin, visibly frustrated, shouted that everything he was doing was for the greater good of humanity and that he wasn't some disgusting creep trying to exploit kids. Lin added that since Yuan knew all this, then there was no need to beat around the bush. However, Yuan agreed to let Lan attend the university on one condition. Seeing how Yuan was dressed like a brokey, Lin assumed the ugly cow's condition would definitely be money, so he could increase his res and steez. But the top G silenced his stupid, arrogant mouth, telling him if he had so much money, then he should have used some to fix his disgusting face. Yuan then revealed his real condition. He would only allow Lan to go to the university if he could accompany her and stay by her side throughout the training. After letting out those words, Yuan walked away like a true Sigma, leaving Lin stunned. But before he left, he told Lin that if he refused his condition, he could forget about Lan joining the university. Lin, left pondering, wondered how a worthless, talentless, monumental loser like Yuan could ever hope to join an institution meant for the gifted. A short while later, Yuan was discharged from the hospital. As he walked home with Lan, she expressed concern that he had left the hospital too early and might not have fully recovered. Yuan reassured her that he was fine, promising to cook her something delicious when they got home. The mention of food excited the glutton, making her the happiest girl in the world, and she immediately began listing all the tasty dishes she wanted. Meanwhile, that moment, Yuan glanced down at his hands and froze. What he thought were bruises weren't bruises at all. They were signs of livor mortis, the telltale marks of someone who had been dead, leaving him utterly shocked. When they got home, Yuan prepared lunch for Lan, which she quickly devoured, leaving none for Yuan because in their household there was no gender equality when it came to food. However, Lan immediately noticed that Yuan hadn't eaten anything at all, and his complexion looked ghostly pale since they came back from the hospital. Trying to avoid raising her concerns, Yuan took the dirty plates to the sink, casually explaining that it was normal to lose your appetite after being in a coma for so long. As he washed the dishes, Yuan's mind raced with thoughts about the strange things that had been happening since his discharge. He hadn't felt hungry or sleepy, and he couldn't even use the bathroom. Worst of all, the livor mortis marks kept spreading across his skin. Yuan had no blood pressure, no heartbeat, and no body temperature. He had no body heat at all. These signs pointed to one terrifying conclusion. He was a living corpse, a dead man walking. Yuan tried to figure out what could have caused this bizarre condition, and guessed that it must have something to do with the Egyptian coffin he had hidden under during the attack. Perhaps its ancient powers had somehow preserved his spirit when he was attacked by the monster in the ruin. His thoughts, however, were interrupted by Lin's phone call. Lin informed him that after thinking it over, he had decided that Lan was a genius the university couldn't afford to lose. So he agreed that both Yuan and Lan could enroll in the university together. While casually playing with red crystals forming in his hand, Lin warned Yuan that if his grades in any subject dropped below 90%, he'd be kicked out. Yuan shrugged it off and said it wouldn't be a problem. Before long, Yuan and Lan arrived at the prestigious university for the city's top 10% of talented individuals. Outside the campus, Lan noticed a statue and guessed it was Confucius. But Yuan corrected her, explaining that it was Nunkyo, the founder of the university and the most powerful ability user in the city. Just then, a femboy approached them, introducing himself as Yihan, a senior tasked with welcoming new students. Without wasting a minute, he tossed a bag of enrollment supplies to Yuan and immediately turned his attention to Lan, handing her supplies with much more respect. The ultimate simp even offered to personally escort her to her dormitory. Yuan, annoyed by the dumb dude's hose over bro's attitude, shoved the donkey aside and told him they could manage on their own. Yihan was visibly irritated by being tossed aside like garbage, but there was little he could do but watch as they walked away. As Yuan and Lan continued toward the campus, the communication watch in Yuan's enrollment bag started beeping. A voice announced that military training for new students was about to begin, and they needed to report to the playground promptly. Meanwhile, the other students complained loudly about the constant beeping of the watch. Some even threw it on the floor and stomped on it, while one guy freaked out, claiming the beeping was spiking his already high blood pressure. Yuan and Lan, on the other hand, were unbothered since the watch wasn't tormenting them like it was the others. Curious, Lan asked Yuan why the watch wasn't driving him crazy like it was doing to everyone else. Yuan explained that after he received the first instruction from the watch, he simply replied with "received," and it stopped beeping ever since. Lan, whose watch beeped every 5 minutes, was getting fed up. She begged the watch to stop because the sound was putting her in the mood, and she didn't want to flood her peaches. Surprisingly, her plea worked, and the watch stopped beeping. She couldn't help but think there must be some sick, degenerate, cultured creep controlling the watch from behind the scenes. Eventually, the watch stopped beeping for everyone, and the students sat down, waiting to be enrolled. Suddenly, a smoking hot chick with big juicy melons appeared in front of the students and told them to be quiet. The sus manner in which she said the word quiet made it look like she was trying to shove a sausage into her mouth. However, the Melanie Latina introduced herself as Lu Wen, the freshman instructor, and told the students they could come on her. Sorry, come to her if they faced any challenges, but only if they passed the upcoming military test. She then exempted Lan from the test, as she was underage, and instructed the rest to sign the papers before them so they could proceed to the military test location. As the students skimmed the agreement, which stated that the university wouldn't be held responsible for anything that happened to their worthless lives, they flipped out, questioning what kind of test this was. Lu Wen calmly pointed out that if they were too scared to sign, they could always head to the administrative office and withdraw. However, she mentioned that passing the military test was the only way to obtain the Chu crystal, which would enhance their abilities. This caught Yuan's attention. He realized that with the Chu crystal, he might finally have a chance at gaining some sort of power. So without hesitation, he signed the agreement. After all, he was already a zombie. What more could possibly happen to him? Seeing Yuan sign the document without complaining like the other losers, a random dude named Sing, standing beside Lu Wen, was impressed. He thought that even though Yuan looked so skinny, like a shoelace, he definitely had some guts. 40 students who had signed the paper then boarded the truck that was waiting to take them to the military training site. Just then, King approached Yuan, and as a reward for following the watch's instructions earlier, offered him some advice. He grabbed Yuan's hand and told him to use the watch to call for help when in danger and to protect it at all costs. Realizing King was behind the watch's commands, Yuan demanded to know why he had turned off Lan's watch. King smirked and admitted that after hearing Lan complain about the beep sound, he found her voice too irresistible and couldn't help but follow her every command. Yuan, disgusted by his words, lost his cool and lunged at the guy, but the truck began to move just in time. A few hours later, they arrived at Snake Gate Mountain, the site of their military training. Lu Wen then informed the group that the area was a government-controlled zone designed to artificially breed aliens. She revealed their task: survive 3 days on the mountain, eliminate the aliens, and get the Chu orbs. She added that supplies had been provided, but many students were now visibly anxious at the thought of encountering aliens. Lu Wen then told them that if they were too scared, they were free to remain outside. Yuan, however, was determined to go in. The chance to obtain the Chu crystal was too tempting to pass up. Before they entered, Lu Wen reminded them that in moments of extreme danger, they should use their watches to call for help. The watches also emitted high-frequency waves to repel lower-level aliens, but warned them that continuous use would drain the battery, which only lasted for 3 days. With that, a portal opened, and as the students entered, Lu Wen gave them a final warning: stick together and absolutely no attacking each other. Anyone caught breaking that rule would be expelled and sent to the military court. Once inside the realm, Lu Wen, the succulent Melanie, instructed the students to form groups of 6, as group combat was much safer in this environment. Everyone quickly started to team up, forming groups. Yuan, however, found it difficult to join a group. He was repeatedly rejected, with some students mocking him for looking like a low-budget brunt. Noticing that Yuan was being left out, a girl named Xiao Yan invited him to join her group, as there were only 4 and needed 2 more members. But before he could respond, one of her teammates rudely interjected, insisting they didn't need worthless scumbags in their crew. Yuan, already frustrated, could tell the guy just didn't want him in the team. Annoyed, he decided to go solo. Meanwhile, two random ugly delinquents were hiding in the bushes, keeping an eye on Yuan. They noticed he wasn't following the rest of the students and had taken a different path, which made them suspicious. They wondered if Yuan had somehow sensed their presence. A few minutes later, as Yuan ventured deeper into the realm, he pulled out a piece of paper containing information about the realm. The paper revealed that the alien species inhabiting this area was called the frost snow snake, which hunted by detecting body heat. It also mentioned that the Chu crystal found in these snakes was of high quality, granting 4 key abilities to the user. Enhanced senses, also called super sensing, the power to freeze objects, the ability to repair damages, and immunity to death. As Yuan reached the middle of the realm, he noticed frost covering the ground, which surprised him. Looking ahead, he saw a tree with a green frost snow snake coiled around its branches. He immediately unsheathed his dagger, ready for a fight. Sensing his movement, the snake dropped from the tree, preparing to strike. Yuan immediately charged forward like a lightning bolt, but then he suddenly paused. The snake wasn't attacking him. In that moment, Yuan remembered that the frost snow snake relied on body heat to hunt. Since he was practically a living zombie with no body temperature, he was as invisible to the snake as a piece of wood. Without a second thought, Yuan swiftly sliced off the head of the frost snow snake. But to his dismay, he realized that the snake's death exemption ability had been triggered, and it began regenerating. Thinking quickly, Yuan pulled a 1000 IQ move. He sliced the snake into pieces with the precision of a Michelin chef, leaving no chance for the creature to recover. With the snow snake obliterated, a glowing Chu orb materialized before Yuan's eyes. So he picked up the Chu orb, and as he absorbed it, a blinding, shattering light engulfed him. Almost instantly, he felt an immense surge of mystic energy coursing through his body, signaling that his ability had reached level 1. Meanwhile, the group of 4 students who had rejected Yuan earlier stood idly in one spot, discussing how they could gather as many Chu orbs as possible and absorb them. Little did the clueless morons know they were spied on by a bunch of ugly-ass thugs. The thugs had accidentally smashed their own wristwatches and now intended to steal those of the unsuspecting group. Meng, the leader of the burnt-faced thugs, with the face of a gorilla and the physique of a low-budget John Cena, ordered his crew to ambush the group and snatch their watches. Meanwhile, back at the university, King was watching everything unfold on the computer screen. Lu Wen then approached him and asked whether they should intervene, since it was clear a fight was about to break out instead of a search for Chu orbs. However, King casually dismissed the idea of helping, insisting that the students could fend for themselves. There was no reason, in his opinion, to rescue anyone. On the other hand, after absorbing the crystal, Yuan decided to test out the powers he had gained from the frost snow snake. He immediately pulled a Sub-Zero's move, unleashing his freezing ability on the leaves of a nearby tree. He quickly realized, however, that he could only freeze objects for about 10 seconds before the effect wore off. Next, he tried the heat-sensing ability and discovered he could detect the body heat of anything within a 10-meter radius. But as he pondered, Yuan couldn't help but feel that the death exemption ability was completely useless to him, given his zombie-like status. While brooding under a tree, wondering how he could level up his abilities further, another frost snow snake silently slithered down from the branches above, attempting to attack him. Without hesitation, Yuan slashed off its head, realizing that severing the head was the key to bypassing the snake's death exemption regeneration. Immediately after, 2 more frost snow snakes lunged at him, but he swiftly cut them down with a flurry of precise strikes, collecting their Chu orbs in the process. He absorbed all 3, leveling up his other abilities, except for death exemption, which remained stuck due to his zombie nature. Meanwhile, Meng and his crew of degenerate lowlifes had just finished beating up the moronic weak group of 4 and stealing their wristwatches. Now they were on Yuan's trail, eager to confront him. As they ventured deeper into the realm, they began to encounter the corpses of frost snow snakes, which stopped them in their tracks. Shocked and suddenly filled with doubt, the sight of the feared creatures lying dead shattered their confidence. They had assumed Yuan was a weakling due to his skinny appearance, but now they weren't so sure. Meng, muscles trembling despite his bravado, turned to his lackeys and loudly questioned whether Yuan was an ability user or just a weakling. His goons, equally confused and petrified, begged Meng to retreat. But unwilling to appear cowardly in front of his gang, Meng forced himself to put on a brave face, urging them to press forward. no retreat, no surrender. On the other hand, Yuan discovered a den full of frost snow snakes and was ready to power up fully. But suddenly, using his heat-sensing ability, he realized he wasn't alone. Meng and his disgusting minions surrounded him. Just as Yuan prepared himself, Meng stepped forward, brandishing a dagger. He demanded that Yuan hand over the chew crystals he had collected from the frost snow snakes he'd slain. Yuan, thinking quickly, responded with a flat-out blatant lie, claiming he didn't have any chew crystals on him. Meng, a man of few words and even fewer brain cells, wasn't convinced. He shouted, accusing Yuan of capping since the dead frost snow snakes scattered around clearly indicated otherwise. Yuan kept his cool, telling Meng he hadn't harvested the orbs from the snakes yet. At this point, Yuan was growing increasingly irritated. Meng and his disgusting gang of scumbags had abandoned the actual task at hand and were wasting their time picking on fellow students. Yuan decided it was time to teach them a bitter lesson. To further convince them, Yuan emptied his bag, showing that he indeed had no chew crystals on him. But stubborn as a goat, Meng didn't believe a word. Soon, Meng hatched a new plan. He figured if he could drive Yuan away, he and his crew could claim the chew orbs from the dead snakes for themselves. So, with a menacing stare, Meng demanded that Yuan drop his wristwatch and leave. Yuan complied, dropping his wristwatch, but one of the more twisted members of Meng's gang suggested Yuan also hand over his dagger to prevent him from attacking them later. Yuan, playing along with their foolish game, said he'd need the dagger for protection in case he was attacked by frost snow snakes on his way back. Meng and his boys, trying to act slick, assured Yuan that they had passed through the same path and guaranteed he wouldn't run into any snakes on his way back to the safe zone. Pretending to believe them, Yuan turned his back as if he was about to leave. Thinking they had finally outsmarted him, Meng and his crew turned their backs as well, feeling victorious. Unbeknownst to them, Yuan wasn't done. He stepped hard on one of the dead frost snow snakes, executing the big stepper tick-tock dance on its body. The vibrations instantly triggered the snakes back to life, and they charged straight at Meng and his gang. Still confident they had the upper hand, Meng casually bent down to pick up Yuan's wristwatch. But as he held it, the realization hit him hard. Yuan hadn't even used the sonic function on the watch to defeat the snakes. He'd done it all with his bare hands, a fact that sent chills down Meng's spine. Before he could fully grasp the situation, the snakes were already on the attack, revealing that they had never truly been dead. Terrified, Meng and his lackeys panicked, fleeing like scared roaches. Meanwhile, Yuan calmly walked away from the chaos like a true Sigma. As Yuan made his way to the safe zone, he stumbled upon Xiao Yan, the chopstick of a lady and her moronic companion, still searching for frost snow snakes. The moment Xiao Yan spotted Yuan, she rushed over, asking why he was alone. Yuan explained that he had just been robbed and that his backpack had been stolen. Hearing this, Xiao Yan instantly turned on the concern button, asking if he was hurt. Yuan reassured her that he was fine, but said that he wasn't sure the thugs who robbed him would be fine since they'd run into a swarm of frost snow snakes right after. However, the creepy dude who was already mind-clapping the chick immediately became salty because his ugly face had failed woefully at rizzing Xiao Yan. So he wasted no time grabbing Xiao Yan by the hands, angry that she was feeling Yuan's ultimate rees, using the excuse that they had to hurry up to the scene before the goons loot all the chew orbs. Xiao Yan, however, suggested Yuan should come along since he had no supplies, which only made the guide even angrier. With no other choice, he reluctantly invited Yuan to join them. Initially, Yuan was hesitant, but realizing he would need a dagger to deal with the snakes, he agreed. When they arrived at the spot where Yuan had been robbed, the trio was shocked to discover that Meng and his brainless crew had been turned into snake food. One of them was covered in snake bites, while Meng had barely escaped. The gruesome sight terrified Xiao Yan and her worthless companion, which made them bolt like scared rats, leaving Yuan behind. Once they were gone, Yuan calmly picked up a dagger and got to work, slicing through the snakes. Afterwards, he extracted their chew orbs and absorbed them without hesitation, leveling up 4 of his abilities. Yet he noticed his regeneration ability still refused to improve and sensed something was blocking its progress. To hide the fact that he had absorbed that many orbs, Yuan froze the corpses of the snow snakes so no one would find out. As for Meng's homies, who had met their end, Yuan figured the university should handle it, so he reported the incident to King and Lu Wen. King soon arrived at the scene of the brutal incident, accompanied by Xiao Yan and her obsessive lackey. He quickly began investigating the students' deaths and found that most of them had been unalived by snow snake bites, but one had a knife wound. As he pieced together the scenario in his head, he concluded that Meng had likely used one of their watches to fend off the snakes, since one of the watches found at the site had lost power. He figured Meng and one of his lackeys had tried to escape, and in a desperate attempt to slow down the pursuing snakes, Meng must have stabbed the lackey, sacrificing him to buy time. This explained the stab wound on one of the students. However, King's thoughts took a darker turn. He began to wonder if this was all part of a calculated plan by Yuan to lead Meng and his team into the snake nest, ensuring their demise. Still, something didn't sit right. How that Yuan managed to avoid being attacked when the area seemed to be home to at least 30 snakes. After a moment of contemplation, he shrugged off the suspicion and instructed the students to carry on with their military training. Meanwhile, back at the university cafeteria, Lan was having lunch with Lin, who casually asked if she liked the school. Lan replied that she enjoyed everything about it. Afterwards, Lin handed her a satellite phone, explaining that she could use it to make calls even while in the Fawn realm. At first, Lan hesitated because Yuan had always warned her of stranger danger, but she eventually accepted the phone excitedly. Lin then inquired about Yuan's whereabouts, and Lan mentioned he was off doing military training. Upon hearing this, Lin was stunned, his jaw dropping in disbelief. He couldn't fathom how the university allowed a powerless, non-ability incapable like Yuan to join the military training. The thought of something happening to Yuan terrified him, because he knew Lan would never forgive him or the school if anything went wrong. Excusing himself, Lin made his way outside while Lan called after him, asking if the military training was dangerous. Lin, trying to downplay the situation, reassured her with a casual lie, saying it was no more than a walk in the park. Meanwhile, back at Snakegate Mountain, Lu Wen sat with a random guy dressed like a man in black, waiting for King to return from his investigation. Just then, a dude who looked like he'd been stood up at prom approached them. Cloaked in a cape and wielding a long spear, he introduced himself as Feng Yumo, from the university's Wind Dragon Squad, sent on a mission to the mountain. Luo Wen instantly recognized his maiden ass as one of the university's big shots, and wondered why she hadn't been informed that someone of his status was on a mission at Snakegate Mountain. After introducing herself, Lu Wen informed Feng Yumo that she was the instructor overseeing the military training currently taking place in the mountain. Feng Yumo then mentioned he was sent to rescue some weak sissy named Yuan before heading into the realm without further explanation. Lu Wen, puzzled by his sudden appearance, questioned why Feng Yumo had come to rescue someone mid-training. The random dude sitting with her, though just as clueless, added that Feng Yumo was pretty famous. He explained that Feng Yumo had gone on a quest to gather Chu orbs from frost snow snakes to save his terminally ill brother, which had granted his brother immunity to death. He also mentioned that Feng Yumo had severe face blindness. As Feng Yumo ventured into the realm, he silently hoped to find a few frost snow snakes along the way. Not long after, he stumbled upon several frost snow snakes that had been messily chopped up. The sight piqued his curiosity, and he wondered who could have been responsible for such a shoddy job. Moments later, he spotted Yuan unleashing his salt bomb, move minus the salt sprinkling on the snakes. Feng Yumo's gaze landed on the knife Yuan was using to hack away at the snakes, and he couldn't believe how badly damaged the blade's edges were. Freshmen were always given top-tier weapons, so he wondered how Yuan could have ruined his blade like that. Approaching Yuan, Feng Yumo bluntly asked why he had abused the blade so badly. Yuan immediately went into full defense mode like Prime Harvey Specter, demanding to know why Feng Yumo was asking him cringed-worthy questions like he was the head of the university. After throwing a bit of a tantrum, Yuan finally told Feng to hand over his own blade since he was basically destroyed. Without hesitation, Feng Yumo handed him a new blade. But before leaving, he shot Yuan a cold stare, warning him to only take the Chu orbs that had appeared and leave the rest of the snow snakes for him. After dropping this icy warning, Feng Yumo made a slick entrance, effortlessly blasting the snow snakes with his frost mystic energy, without even breaking a sweat. Seeing Feng Yumo's 1 million aura attack, Yuan was momentarily stunned. For some strange cosmic reason, he found himself admiring Feng Yumo's spear, assuming it must be the official weapon of ability users. As Feng Yumo bragged about his impressive strike, Yuan couldn't help but feel disgusted. The idea that an official ability user was competing with newbies for snow snakes in a military training area felt shady to him. With this suspicion in mind, Yuan pulled a move straight out of Mortal Kombat, encasing Feng Yumo in an ice block, just like Sub-Zero. He then proceeded to pound his face through the ice repeatedly until his hands were sore, finally deciding it was enough brutality for one scene. After his wild outburst, Yuan nonchalantly picked up Feng Yumo's spear, saying he'd borrow it for the time being, leaving Feng trapped in the ice block. Hours later, Feng Yumo, now free from his icy prison, stumbled out leaning on a stick like an 80-year-old beaten-up grandpa. When he finally made it to King, the latter looked him over and asked why Feng Yumo looked like he'd been fighting both Hulk and Thanos at the same time. Begging for help, Feng Yumo asked Sing to heal him with his Suntracer ability, which could revert a person's condition to what it was 24 hours earlier. After being healed, Feng Yumo explained his unfortunate encounter with Yuan to King. However, thanks to his blindness to the face, Feng had no clue that the person who had iced him was actually Yuan, the very person he had been sent to rescue. He thought it was just some random student from the university. After listening to the sorry tale, King told Feng Yumo that he hadn't received any signals from the area where Feng claimed to have been attacked, as there wasn't a student with a watch nearby. Still, he assured him that the useless thief who stole his spear would be found sooner or later. With that matter settled, Feng Yumo then asked for the location of his target, Yuan. But King reminded him that since he was in the realm, his real mission should be to find as many snow snakes as possible and gather their chew orbs. Meanwhile, 2 days later, Meng was still hopelessly lost, trying to find just one chew crystal orb. At every turn, he was greeted by signs saying, "No entry, road under construction," leaving him utterly shocked and frustrated. Unbeknownst to him, Feng Yumo was watching from the bushes, delighted that Meng was lost. With Meng out of the picture, Feng had no competition for gathering the orbs. Elsewhere, Yuan, who had been using his map to find the perfect location for more chew crystal orbs, stumbled upon a field littered with the corpses of snow snakes. He wondered who could have been responsible for the carnage. Just then, he spotted a mountain peak that wasn't marked on his map and decided to check it out, hoping he might find a hidden nest of snow snakes. As expected, Yuan discovered a group of frost snow snakes inside the mountain and obliterated them effortlessly. Afterwards, he held their chew orbs high, absorbing their essence, which caused his abilities to level up significantly. With his newfound heat-sensing ability, Yuan could now detect movement up to a kilometer away. However, despite the boost in all his other powers, his death exemption ability stubbornly refused to upgrade. Walking out of the mountain, Yuan started hearing boss music in his head, and it dawned on him that things had been way too easy. At that exact moment, he was ambushed by the biggest frost snow snake he had ever seen. The massive creature lunged at him with an airstrike of terrifying speed, nearly taking his head off. But just in time, Yuan pulled a move straight out of the Matrix, dodging the attack. Unfortunately, he still ended up with a nasty bruise on his hand, which he quickly healed using his regeneration ability. Realizing the snake was on a whole different level than the weaker ones he had faced, Yuan knew brute force alone wouldn't cut it. He had to outsmart this beast. That's when he came up with the smartest plan known to man. He sub-zeroed the giant snake's head, freezing it solid. Seeing the move actually worked, he proceeded to caress the entire creature's body in ice. Just as he was about to finish the beast off with the borrowed spear, he noticed the ice starting to crack. Acting fast, Yuan leaped into the air like Thor and impaled the snake's head, driving it to the ground with a massive crash. Thinking he had won, Yuan was caught off guard when the chew orb didn't extract itself, meaning the snake wasn't dead yet, and its death exemption ability was still active. Meanwhile, back at the safe zone, Lu Wen, hovering in the air like Doctor Strange, informed the returning students that they had just half an hour left before the military training ended. At that moment, Meng, who had been frantically searching for his way back, finally stumbled into the safe zone, looking worse than a homeless hobo. Following closely behind was Feng Yumo, who had mistakenly believed Meng was Yuan, all because Meng had been wearing Yuan's watch. When the watch was tracked, Meng's position had shown up instead. King arrived just in time to point out to Feng Yumo that his face blindness was getting worse. At this rate, Feng might walk into a lion's den, mistaking it for the local bar. He explained that Feng had been tailing Meng the entire time, thinking he was Yuan. After this revelation, King approached the terrified Meng, who had quite literally wet his pants. King, with a stern look, demanded an explanation as to why Meng was in possession of Yuan's watch. Back in the realm, Yuan noticed that the giant frost snow snake was regenerating at an insane speed, so he swiftly sliced it into tiny pieces. With that, a massive chew orb, much larger than the ones he had absorbed before, appeared. Without hesitation, Yuan absorbed it, instantly leveling up. This time, he gained a new ability that boosted all his powers by a staggering 1200% for 30 seconds, but at the cost of being weakened for 2 days afterwards. Meanwhile, back at the safe zone, Meng started crying like a pathetic loser after realizing he was doomed for breaking the university's rule against attacking fellow students. In a matter of seconds, he was whisked away to the military court to face judgment. After that, King instructed Liu Wen to lead the remaining students back to the university. King and Feng Yumo, however, stayed behind, with Feng Yumo eagerly awaiting the return of his precious spear. Yuan still hadn't returned from his expedition, leaving King pissed to the bone. In all his life, he had never waited this long for anyone like this. To make matters worse, he was waiting for a guide and not even for a properly arched backshot experience. Finally, Yuan arrived, looking like a worn-out PS2 god of war. He casually asked if the other students had already gone back or if he was the first to return. At that moment, Feng Yumo's eyes locked onto his spear, and what he saw made his blood boil to a volcano. His beloved spear was in terrible shape, like it had been used to isekai the devil himself. Seeing this, Feng's eyes turned bloodshot, practically bulging out of their sockets in rage. Just then, Yuan felt an overwhelming fatigue, as if the Grim Reaper himself was holding him back from taking another step. Before he could fully process it, Feng Yumo, consumed with anger, charged at Yuan with the same fury of a woman scorned. Without hesitation, he delivered a powerful punch straight to Yuan's jaw. The punch sent Yuan crashing to the ground faster than a lightweight in a bar brawl. Seeing this, King scolded Feng Yumo for being too rough, warning that the punch could have sent Yuan straight to the afterlife. Meanwhile, Yuan, who had been knocked out cold by that single hit, finally regained consciousness. As he stirred, he reached for the gun he had retrieved earlier from the corpse of one of Meng's goons. Noticing that Yuan was awake, Ting wasted no time and began accusing him of leading Meng's boys to their deaths by luring them into the frost snow snake nest. He demanded that Yuan surrender, painting him as the mastermind behind the tragedy. At that moment, Yuan realized the true agenda of King and Feng Yumo. They were trying to frame him. Feng Yumo was covering up the fact that he had come to the military training grounds to illegally poach frost snow snakes, while King was desperately looking for a scapegoat to blame for the students' deaths. Armed with this knowledge, Yuan channeled his inner Tom Cruise, crouching low before firing shots at them. However, Ting quickly summoned a defensive shield, making it impossible for the bullets to penetrate. To make matters worse, King, with a wicked smile like the Joker's, started taunting Yuan. He sneered, saying that once Yuan was either dead or locked away in some distant prison, he'd make a move on Yuan's sister and clap her senseless. That twisted remark was all the motivation Yuan needed to go absolutely apeshit. Emitting a blinding light, Yuan assured the two risless donkeys that for that particular comment, they would not live to see the next sunrise. As his fury surged, Yuan's powers skyrocketed as if they were on steroids, with new abilities emerging. However, he knew he only had 30 seconds before this Super Saiyan mode wore off. With immense power coursing through him, Yuan blasted King and Feng Yumo with an overwhelming wave of frost energy, causing them to slowly freeze in place. Desperate, King tried to activate his Sun Tracer ability to rewind time 24 hours, but to his horror, he couldn't even move his hands. They were already frozen solid. On the other hand, Yuan could feel the toll the power surge was taking on him, draining every ounce of his energy. Before he was completely spent, he pulled out the gun, ready to end it by blowing their brains out. But to his shock, even the gun had frozen in the overwhelming cold. Moments later, his entire body started to freeze, sending his system into shock and knocking him out instantly. Meanwhile, Ting and Feng Yumo, who had a sudden change of heart after realizing they'd taken things too far, stood there watching Yuan sprawled on the ground. Summoning his last bit of strength, King used his Sun Tracer power to turn back time, preventing Yuan from crossing into the afterlife. Seeing the two men helpless on the ground, Feng Yumo dragged their weakened bodies to the hospital. Later that night, at the hospital, the doctors and hot nurse concluded that Yuan was dead, as his heart had no pulse and his blood pressure was at 0. They prepared to take him to the morgue, but just then, King burst into the room, shouting at them to stop. He told the doctor and nurse that their services weren't needed because Yuan was just faking his death. Feng Yumo tried to convince Ting that Yuan was long gone, pointing out the signs of livor mortis, but King unleashed the Sun Tracer power on Yuan for a second time. The following morning, as King and Feng Yumo stood together, looking at King's phone, they checked the National Youth Ability Rankings, where Ting was ranked 68th and Feng Yumo 69th. Suddenly, they were startled by Yuan, who had miraculously woken up. Yuan, surprised to see the two capital idiots by his bedside, wondered when this sudden bromance began. Just then, he received a message from his sister Lan, reminding him to take care of himself, as she was enjoying her best life at the university. Just then, King introduced himself as the president of the student union and apologized for provoking Yuan earlier, which led to their fight. He added that the fight had brought them closer, though not too close, and offered a handshake. But Yuan, tapping into his Mortal Kombat instincts, delivered a powerful punch to King's head, sending him crashing to the floor. With that bold move, Yuan extended his hand for a handshake, telling King that now they could be bros. In the following weeks, Lan worked tirelessly to absorb the crystal's power, so she could awaken her ability, but even with Lin's help, it was proving to be a real challenge. Lu Wen eventually stepped in to assist, but despite her support, Lan still found it incredibly difficult. Watching her struggle, Lu Wen began to doubt whether giving Lan the King Crystal to absorb right away was the right choice, even with her talent. However, Lan silenced those doubts when she summoned all her inner energy and successfully absorbed the King Crystal, which emitted a dazzling strobe of light. This, however, came at a cost. She sacrificed 20 years of her lifespan to do it. Not long after, Yuan returned to the university, and as soon as Lan saw him, she dashed over and hugged him faster than Luffy, devouring a feast. She asked him why his uniform was different and darker, asking if he had become the new Undertaker. Yuan explained that he had joined the student council and was now a committee member. Thrilled, Lan told him that Lin had given her a Fire Cloud B King crystal to absorb, making her a powerful ability user. Hearing this, Yuan grew anxious. His mission to prevent her from becoming an ability user and fighting monsters in the future was slipping away. His only hope now was to grow stronger and protect herself. Lan excitedly shared that she had unlocked her hidden abilities, giving her the speed of Flash and the strength of Hulk. To show off, she offered Yuan a front row seat to her powers in action. In a blink, she took a page off Liu Kang's move and leaped into the air, landing an impressive kick that shattered the university's founding father statue. While Lan was delighted with her display, Yuan immediately knew he'd have to pay for the damage to the school's property. That evening, he wrote an apology letter to the administration, asking them to forgive his sister's psychotic, reckless behavior. When Lu Wen received the letter, she was disappointed but accepted their apology, warning that if Lan ever felt the need to kick something again, she might as well smash her brother's ugly face instead. As Yuan and Lan left her office, Lu Wen mentioned how impressed she was with Yuan's performance during military training. She then offered to help him absorb the resonance crystal so he could become an ability user, but Yuan declined, revealing that he had already activated his ability. It was then that Lu Wen noticed the student council uniform Yuan was wearing. She wondered if King, who had once told her he was searching for a successor to be the next student union president, had finally chosen Yuan.